All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some pretty intense true crime.
Oh, yeah.
You sent over some excerpts from a podcast called Anatomy of Murder,
Okay.
and specifically the episode that deals with the cases of Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham.
Right.
It all centers around the University of Virginia, and it's a story that is as chilling as it is fascinating.
And I think what's really interesting about this episode is it kind of uses the disappearance of Hannah Graham in 2014 as a lens to revisit the Morgan Harrington case, which had gone cold back in 2009.
Yeah.
It really shows how these tragedies can impact families and communities for years to come.
Totally. And the episode starts by painting this really eerie picture.
Yeah.
Another young woman vanishing from Charlottesville in the fall,
Right.
just like Morgan had 5 years prior.
Yeah, and it's almost too much. It's so unsettling, the similarities.
Yeah.
And that's where Morgan's mother, Jill Harrington, comes in. The episode talks about how she felt this instant connection, like her antenna went up the moment she heard about Hannah. It's like she could just sense history repeating itself.
Which is tragic on so many levels, but it also makes you wonder about, like, the psychology at play here.
Right.
Like, why are college campuses, and especially in the fall, so vulnerable to these kinds of predators?
Well, you have a large concentration of young people, many of whom are away from home for the first time. They're exploring new environments, testing boundaries, maybe letting their guard down a bit. It creates all these opportunities that predators are sadly all too aware of.
Okay, so let's fast forward now to the night of Hannah's disappearance.
Okay.
September 12th, 2014. She's a sophomore at UVA heading to a party. And what's interesting here is that the episode details how surveillance footage becomes absolutely crucial in piecing together what happened.
Yeah, and it's amazing how technology has really transformed investigations.
Yeah.
The episode shows how these security cameras actually capture Hannah walking with a man.
Right.
But there's something off about her demeanor. She seems unsteady, almost as if she's being pulled along.
Right.
Just this really chilling detail that instantly raises a red flag.
It does, and it raises the question of, like, bystander intervention, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, people saw her with this man, people saw her in distress, but nobody stepped in. You know, looking back, it's easy to say someone should have done something, but I think it also reveals the complexities of human behavior in those situations.
It really does.
Yeah.
Often, there's that mind your own business mentality, or maybe people are afraid to get involved, or perhaps they completely misinterpret what they're seeing. It's a stark reminder that sometimes even a small intervention could have a massive impact.
Totally. So the episode then reveals that the man in the video is identified as Jesse Matthew. A viewer recognized him and tipped off the police.
Right.
But here's where things take a really disturbing turn.
Right.
Matthew has a past, a history of sexual misconduct allegations at other universities. It makes you wonder, how did this guy slip through the cracks for so long?
Yeah, it's horrifying. It's a horrible example of how systemic failures can have devastating consequences. Did these previous universities fail to adequately investigate those allegations?
Right.
Were they more concerned with protecting their reputation than their students? Those are hard questions that they need to be asked.
Yeah, for sure. So now the police have their prime suspect. They search his apartment and car.
Right.
And they find gloves, antiseptic, and even get a canine scent detection hit near his car.
Wow.
It seems pretty damning.
Right.
But the episode mentions this concept of probable cause.
Yeah.
Can you break that down for us a bit? What does that actually mean in this context?
So probable cause is a legal standard that police have to meet to make an arrest or get a warrant.
Right.
It means they need more than just suspicion.
Yeah.
They need enough evidence to reasonably believe that a crime has been committed and that the person they suspect is the one who committed it. So while the evidence they found in Matthew's apartment and car was concerning, it might not have been enough on its own to establish that probable cause for an immediate arrest.
So they needed more concrete evidence to directly link him to Hannah.
Exactly. And things get even more perplexing. When Matthew voluntarily goes to the police station, but then refuses to speak and asks for a lawyer, then, while supposedly under surveillance, he just takes off, flees the state.
It's like he knew he was cornered,
Right.
but couldn't help but try to outsmart the authorities. What do you make of that behavior?
It's fascinating, isn't it? His actions suggest this strange mix of awareness and desperation. Maybe he thought he could manipulate the situation or buy himself some time, but ultimately fleeing just made him look even more suspicious.
Yeah, so that brings us to a critical turning point in the investigation.
Okay.
The episode really focuses on a piece of evidence that becomes absolutely crucial. The shorts that Matthew is wearing in that surveillance video, Let's talk about what they found on them.
So forensic testing revealed traces of Hannah's DNA on those shorts.
Wow.
And that, my friend, was the breakthrough investigators needed. It created that direct, undeniable link between Matthew and Hannah.
So a tiny piece of genetic material becomes the key to unlocking the case.
Yeah,
It's incredible to think about the power of forensic science, right?
absolutely. This case really highlights how DNA analysis has revolutionized criminal investigations. Imagine a piece of evidence that's invisible to the naked eye can become the linchpin that brings a perpetrator to justice.
So this DNA discovery led to a nationwide manhunt, and Matthew was eventually apprehended in Texas. But even with him in custody, the search for Hannah continued.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that agonizing,
Yeah.
and the tragic discovery that finally brought some answers, albeit heartbreaking ones.
It's heartbreaking. The episode really captures that agonizing uncertainty, that hope mixed with dread that must have consumed Hannah's loved ones during those 5 long weeks. They had their suspect, but their daughter was still out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And then 5 weeks after her disappearance, the news that everyone had feared arrived.
Yeah.
Tragically, Hannah's remains were found behind an abandoned property just outside of Charlottesville.
Right.
And here's where the connection to Morgan's case becomes even more chilling. The location was just miles from where Morgan's remains had been discovered 5 years earlier.
It's a heartbreaking confirmation that these cases are deeply intertwined.
It really is.
And for Jill Harrington, it must have been just this devastating realization, knowing that the man who likely took her daughter's life was also responsible for another young woman's death.
Adds another layer of tragedy to an already horrific story.
Totally. And it really solidifies that sense of urgency to bring Matthew to justice, not just for Hannah, but for Morgan as well.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what the episode dives into next. The reopening of Morgan's cold case and the pursuit of justice for both of these young women. So let's explore how the investigation into Hannah's disappearance unearthed critical connections to Morgan's case and another case that we haven't talked about yet. The assault of a young woman named RG back in 2005.
And it's remarkable how the pursuit of justice for one victim can lead to breakthroughs in other cases.
Right.
As investigators delved deeper into Hannah's disappearance, they started uncovering these really chilling echoes of the past.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect.
Right.
One piece of information leading to another, ultimately revealing a pattern of criminal behavior that had gone unchecked for far too long.
And that's where the power of forensic science, and particularly DNA evidence, comes into play again.
Right.
It's like a thread that connects these seemingly unrelated cases, weaving this tapestry of evidence that points directly to Jesse Matthew.
And that thread leads us to the assault of RG in 2005.
Right.
So remember we mentioned earlier that DNA from Morgan's case had been linked to an unknown assailant years ago.
Yes.
Well, as the investigation into Hannah unfolds, people start noticing a striking resemblance between Jesse Matthew and the composite sketch from RG's case.
Yeah.
It's like the puzzle pieces are finally starting to fall into place.
It's chilling, isn't it?
Yeah.
The episode really drives home the fact that these weren't isolated incidents.
Right.
There was a pattern of predatory behavior that had gone unchecked for far too long, and the search for justice for Hannah was bringing it all to light.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
We've only just scratched the surface here. But before we move on to the trials and the pursuit of justice for Morgan and Hannah, I just want to pause here for a moment. What are your initial thoughts on this web of interconnected cases? What stands out to you as particularly intriguing or disturbing?
Well, what strikes me is the ripple effect of violence.
Yeah.
How one act can have such far-reaching consequences impacting not just the immediate victims, but their families, communities, and even seemingly unrelated cases from the past. It's just a sobering reminder that these tragedies leave lasting scars.
Yeah, I agree. It's a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of these crimes and how the pursuit of justice for one victim can often illuminate a much larger and darker story. But before we delve into the legal proceedings and the pursuit of justice for Morgan and Hannah, let's take a moment to kind of absorb what we've learned so far. What are your initial reactions to this kind of tangled web of interconnected cases? What's resonating with you at this point?
I think for me, it's just the realization that these weren't isolated incidents. There was this pattern of behavior that went unchecked for far too long, and it took the tragedy of Hannah's disappearance to bring it all to the surface. It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant, we need to pay attention to those red flags, and we need to hold both individuals and institutions accountable for addressing predatory behavior.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. We need to be aware of the potential for violence, to speak up when we see something wrong, and to advocate for systemic changes that can help prevent future tragedies. But that's a conversation for another time. Right now, let's shift our focus to the legal proceedings and the long-awaited pursuit of justice for both Morgan and Hannah. So as we kind of delve into the legal proceedings here,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that while Matthew was awaiting trial for Hannah's murder,
Right.
he was also charged with RG's assault from 2005.
Right.
That's over a decade of this guy potentially getting away with these horrific acts.
It's crazy.
And the episode talks about how RG bravely traveled back to Virginia
Yeah.
to face him in court. Talk about strength and resilience.
And incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
Here she is years later, choosing to confront her attacker head on, determined to reclaim her story and see justice served. And the episode even mentions that Jill Harrington was present at that trial, too. It really speaks volumes about the shared experience of these families united by tragedy, but also this unwavering pursuit of accountability.
It really is a testament to the strength and solidarity that can kind of emerge from these just unimaginable circumstances.
Yeah.
Now, the episode describes the trial itself as pretty harrowing with the evidence presented, painting a very stark picture of the brutality that RG endured.
Right.
But instead of a full trial, Matthew opted for an Alford plea. What's the significance of that, legally speaking?
An Alford plea is a fascinating legal maneuver. It allows a defendant to maintain their innocence while acknowledging that the evidence against them is likely strong enough to secure a conviction. It's a bit of a paradox, but it often comes down to a strategic decision,
Okay.
weighing the risks of a trial
Right.
against the potential for a lesser sentence.
So it's a way to avoid a full trial without fully admitting guilt.
Exactly. And while it might seem like a loophole, it still results in a conviction.
Right.
In this case, it meant that Matthew was held accountable for RG's assault,
Yeah.
even without explicitly admitting his guilt.
But RG wasn't about to let him have the last word. The episode highlights her incredibly powerful victim impact statement.
Oh, it's a truly remarkable moment. RG uses her voice to reclaim her power, refusing to be defined by this attack. She transforms from victim to survivor right there in the courtroom. It's a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
It is. It really is. And it's a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, healing and hope are possible. But the story doesn't end there. 6 years after Morgan Harrington's disappearance, Matthew finally faces charges for her murder.
Right.
And the episode outlines how investigators meticulously built their case, relying on a combination of forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and even cell phone records.
Yeah, it's a testament to their dedication. They spent years gathering every shred of evidence, piecing together the events that led to Morgan's tragic death. They even presented dog hair evidence, linking Matthew to Morgan through a dog he owned at the time.
Yeah.
The episode really underscores the importance of that meticulous approach, leaving no stone unturned.
Wow. And faced with this mountain of evidence, Matthew made a decision to plead guilty to first-degree murder, not just in Morgan's case, but in Hannah's case as well. It must have been a complex mix of emotions for the families.
Oh, absolutely.
Relief that justice was served, but also the continued grief of their loss.
Yeah, there's no sense of victory in these situations,
Right.
just the somber reality of justice being served. And even though the trials were avoided, the pain of losing their daughters will forever remain with those families.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet outcome for sure.
Yeah.
But what struck me was the unexpected turn that the episode takes after the trials. Instead of focusing solely on the legal proceedings, it explores the aftermath.
Yeah.
Specifically, the Harringtons' journey to find meaning in their loss. It's really powerful stuff.
It really is. And what's particularly striking is Jill Harrington's capacity for empathy.
Yeah.
The episode describes how she reached out to Matthew's mother,
Wow.
acknowledging their shared pain as mothers who had lost children, albeit under vastly different circumstances.
It's such a powerful testament to the human capacity for forgiveness and compassion.
It is.
It would have been so easy to succumb to anger and bitterness.
Right.
But instead she chose understanding and connection.
It speaks volumes about her character and her commitment to finding a path toward healing. And the episode shows how this compassion led to a really remarkable moment of reconciliation between the two mothers.
Yeah.
Embracing in the courtroom, united in their grief.
Wow, that's incredible. It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, hope and healing can emerge from the most unexpected places. But the Harringtons didn't stop there. They channeled their grief into action, founding the organization Help Save the Next Girl to educate young people about predatory violence.
Yeah. This is where their story transcends the legal battle and becomes a testament to the power of turning pain into purpose.
Right.
Instead of being consumed by their loss, they chose to honor Morgan's memory by working to prevent similar tragedies from happening to others.
It's truly inspiring, and the episode goes on to detail some of their efforts, like advocating for legislation to strengthen campus safety measures and promoting awareness about the importance of bystander intervention. It's like they're taking this proactive approach
Yeah.
to addressing the very issues that contributed to both Morgan and Hannah's deaths.
Yeah, it's a powerful example of how individuals can make a tangible difference even in the face of these systemic challenges. Their work is a legacy to their daughter and a beacon of hope for a safer future.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we can choose to be agents of change,
Yeah.
to use our voices and our experiences to advocate for a better world. But before we dive into the lasting impact of the Harringtons' work, I'd like to hear your perspective. What resonated most with you about this part of the story? Was it the legal complexities, the emotional journeys of the families, or the inspiring work of the Harringtons?
Honestly, it's the interconnectedness of it all that really strikes me.
Yeah.
From the legal intricacies of the Alford plea to the deeply personal journey of forgiveness and the impactful advocacy work,
Right.
each element is a thread in this complex tapestry of justice, healing, and resilience.
Yeah, I agree. It's a reminder that these stories are never simple. They're filled with nuances, complexities, and these unexpected turns. And sometimes it's in those unexpected places where we find the most profound lessons and the most inspiring acts of human courage.
Yeah, it's incredible to see how the Harringtons really transform their grief into this force for positive change.
Yeah. The episode even mentions they champion legislation requiring school transcripts to disclose expulsions for sexual misconduct.
Oh, wow.
Seems like a small detail,
Right.
but it could have a massive impact. What are your thoughts on that?
It's about closing those gaps, those systemic cracks
Right.
that allowed predators like Matthew to move from one institution to another without consequence. Imagine if those red flags had been clearly visible. It might have prevented so much pain.
It's a sobering thought, right? This seemingly minor change could have had this ripple effect, potentially saving lives. And the episode highlights how Jill Harrington herself made that connection,
Yeah.
saying that had those laws been in place, both Morgan and Hannah might still be alive.
It really underscores the importance of their advocacy work. It's about shifting from a reactive approach
Right.
to a proactive one, focusing on prevention rather than just responding to tragedy after it strikes.
So it's about creating this culture of accountability and vigilance, right? Not just relying on law enforcement, but empowering individuals and institutions to recognize and address these issues kind of head on.
Exactly. And it's not just about legislation. It's about education, awareness, and fostering a society that prioritizes safety and respect. The Harringtons' work with Help Save the Next Girl is a prime example of that.
Right.
They're reaching out to young people, educating them about the dangers of predatory behavior, and empowering them to make safer choices.
Yeah, it's about equipping the next generation with the knowledge and the tools that they need to navigate these really complex situations. And it's not just about protecting potential victims. It's about fostering this culture of respect and consent where everyone feels safe and empowered.
Absolutely. It's this multifaceted approach, tackling the issue from multiple angles, and it's a testament to the Harringtons' commitment to creating this lasting legacy of positive change in honor of their daughter.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, a story that spans years, multiple victims, and ultimately a journey toward justice and healing. It's been emotionally heavy, but also really deeply insightful. What stands out to you as the most impactful takeaway?
For me, it's the multifaceted nature of justice. Yes, there's a legal aspect,
Yeah.
holding perpetrators accountable for their actions, but there's also the personal aspect,
Right.
the individual journeys of healing and resilience that victims and their families undertake. And then there's this broader societal aspect, pushing for those systemic changes, promoting awareness, working to prevent future tragedies.
Yeah.
This case embodies all of those facets.
It's a reminder that justice isn't just a destination, it's a process, this ongoing commitment to accountability, healing, and prevention. And the episode ends on such a powerful note with this quote from Jill Harrington's book. Living requires courage. Do not just bob along on the surface near the shore afraid. What a powerful call to action, right?
It is. It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, we can choose to live courageously. We can choose to honor those we've lost by fighting for a better future, by speaking up, by taking action, and by refusing to let fear dictate our lives.
It's a message that resonates far beyond the specific case. It's a message for all of us, a reminder that we each have the power to make a difference, no matter how small. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage you to reflect on Jill Harrington's words. How can you choose to live more courageously? What steps can you take, no matter how small, to create a safer and more just world? Remember, even the smallest ripples can create waves of change.
And never underestimate the power of your voice, your actions, and your commitment to making a difference. As we've seen in this case, even in the darkest of times, hope, healing, and justice are always possible.
That's a perfect note to end on. Remember, this deep dive may be over, but the conversation doesn't have to stop here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to create a world where stories like these become relics of the past.